All right, welcome everyone to today's masterclass. I am absolutely thrilled to be your guide as we put on our behavioral psychologist hats and decode the hidden mechanics behind human decision making. So let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to look at exactly why people say yes. And we're not talking about using brute force here, but rather the invisible and frankly fascinating art of reverse psychology. To start us off, think about this. Why do direct commands almost always fail? I mean, you know that feeling, right? The very second someone tells you, hey, do this right now, a tiny voice inside your head instantly screams, yeah, why should I? We are spectacularly stubborn creatures. The human brain just naturally resists forced actions and orders because fundamentally, we desperately crave independence. So here is our roadmap for today's lecture. Instead of just tossing a list of random tricks at you, we're grouping these Machiavellian laws of influence under their core psychological mechanisms. We'll be moving from the psychology of autonomy all the way through to the ethics of influence. Let's kick things off with our first module, the psychology of autonomy and our deep-seated need for control. The human mind is beautifully hardwired to want to feel completely independent. And this brings us to our first law, the illusion of choice. Imagine a parent demanding, go study right now. Well, that's a direct command, and it instantly triggers massive resistance. But what if they ask, would you rather study math or science first? The entire situation shifts. The child's brain is no longer resisting whether to study, it's completely occupied with deciding what to study. Providing structured options basically gives the brain an illusion of choice, and that effortlessly triggers compliance. And that flows right into Law 10, the implanted idea. As behavioral psychologists, we know for a fact that self-generated persuasion is infinitely more powerful than just handing someone unsolicited advice. If you tell someone what to do, they're gonna resist. So instead of commanding them, try this. Just ask a guiding, open-ended question. Then, give them the mental space to actually process it. Before you know it, they discover the solution themselves and claim the brilliant idea as their very own. It's a total game changer. Moving right along into Module 2, Scarcity and Psychological Reactance. This is all about the allure of the unavailable. Okay, so the crucial concept you need to know here is psychological reactance. It's basically that knee-jerk mental reaction that fires off when we feel our freedom or choices are being limited. And it makes that restricted item instantly wildly desirable. This explains Law 2, the forbidden fruit effect. Just think of the story of Adam and Eve. They could literally have anything in the entire garden, but that one forbidden fruit, it became an absolute obsession. Modern marketers use this on us constantly with those limited edition drops. Scarcity doesn't just reduce supply, it manufactures intense psychological desire. And we actually see this exact same reactance in everyday human dynamics through Law 13, strategic withdrawal. Look, if you are constantly available, people are inevitably going to take you for granted. But by deliberately stepping back, you reduce your constant availability and you create artificial scarcity. And almost like magic, the perceived value of your presence just skyrockets. Let's transition to Module 3, weaponizing ego and self-image, and that massive human drive to prove ourselves. Consider this your personal ego toolkit. First up is the mirror of narcissism, or Law 5. If you tell someone, wow, you're a really responsible person, you are reflecting their ideal identity right back at them. They'll instantly act to maintain that specific image because they absolutely do not want to break the narrative they've built for themselves. Then there's the ego challenge. Say a sports coach questions an athlete's capability. Boom, ego triggered. That athlete will work exhaustingly just to prove the doubter wrong. And similarly, we have constructive pessimism. A teacher expressing clinical, objective doubt, without actually insulting the student, triggers the student's self-esteem to go out and achieve the impossible. It's genuinely fascinating how a carefully tailored drop of doubt or praise can so heavily manipulate our behavior. Which brings us to Module 4, the architecture of perception, how context and overload shape our reality. You see, our brains don't process information in a vacuum. We rely heavily on context, on comparison, and honestly, we have really strict capacity limits. This brings us to choice overload, which beautifully explains Law 7, the anxiety of freedom. Imagine sitting at a restaurant and they hand you a menu with 50 items. You get immediate mental fatigue. That decision anxiety from having too many options leads straight to confusion rather than satisfaction. But a menu with just 5 items? You pick something in 10 seconds. Limiting choices actually empowers action. Now, I want you to picture a really massive number. Let's say 80,000. This brings us to the heart of Law 11, the contrast principle. Our brains judge value purely by comparison. So if a negotiator ultimately wants to close a deal at 50,000, they might purposefully start the conversation at a massive anchoring number like 80,000. When they finally concede and drop down to 50,000, your brain compares it to that huge anchor, and suddenly 50,000 feels like a complete steal. And perception also applies heavily to how competent we appear to others. This is Law 12, controlled incompetence. Deliberately appearing less expert in certain areas helps you manage expectations. Think about it. In the modern workplace, being the absolute perfect employee usually just leads straight to burnout because everyone just dumps the responsibilities on you. Showing a little strategic incompetence actually creates a much healthier balance of duties. All right, let's look at Module 5, Lowering Defenses Through Silence and Surrender. The hidden power of just stepping back. This stuff is highly counterintuitive. Sometimes yielding, pausing, or even appearing weak gives you massive psychological leverage. Take strategic surrender, for example. If you argue to win, you instantly trigger defensive walls and emotional escalation in your opponent. But what if you simply say, you know what, maybe you are right? The literal moment you agree, you enact strategic surrender. It instantly defuses their ego. With those defensive walls suddenly gone, they become super open to self-reflection, and sometimes they'll even end up correcting themselves. And that perfectly leads into Law 4, the power of silence. Imagine this scenario in a negotiation. You make your offer. At 3 seconds, intentional silence begins. By second 7, the other person starts feeling this massive, intensely uncomfortable mental void. And by 10 seconds, human nature takes over completely. The target starts over-explaining or literally offering spontaneous concessions. Staying totally silent forces the other person to fill the void. This pairs brilliantly with Law 8, the false weakness strategy. If you deliberately act ordinary or maybe even slightly insecure, you completely lower the opponent's guard. You drastically reduce your perceived threat level. They get overconfident, they get careless, and that naturally encourages them to drop their defenses and start sharing hidden information they normally wouldn't. Finally, let's wrap up with our concluding module, the ethics of influence. We've spent this whole explainer dissecting these behavioral laws, but now we really need to shift from clinical observation to real-world application. I absolutely want you to remember this. Influence and manipulation are not the same thing. The ultimate power in human dynamics isn't control, it's long-term trust. As students of human behavior, you gotta understand that these cognitive glitches should be used to comprehend ourselves and others better, never to cause harm. Ultimately, the greatest power lies not in controlling others, but in deeply understanding human nature. When you truly grasp these mechanics, you don't become a manipulator. You become a far better, far more empathetic communicator. So I want to leave you with one final question to chew on as you go about your day. Are you using these psychological laws to build trust, or are they quietly being used against you? Thank you so much for joining today's explainer, and definitely keep your eyes open to the invisible dynamics happening all around you.